Hare Krishna. Welcome to chapter 4, Jnana Yoga, right? Yoga of the knowledge, right? Okay, so today is a very interesting chapter. We'll discuss a lot of very interesting things, right? It's an interesting chapter. Okay, but first we pay our respects and obeisance to Sri Radha Govinda, the temple deities at ISKCON Mangalore. Neha Mataji, I'm sorry, I didn't confirm. All good?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, have we made you co-host? 1 second. Yeah, done. Okay, and continuing, we pay our respects and obeisance to our spiritual master Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyadi Satarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Srivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Right. So this is what we studied yesterday, right? Chapter 3. Quick recap of what we did yesterday. Arjuna's question was whether we should renounce or whether we should act. First two verses, right? So Krishna says you should act rather than renounce, right? He says Nishkama Karma Yoga is better. And then Krishna tells the way how you travel from Karma Kanda to Karma Yoga. Then we saw the leadership sloka, and we saw the greatest enemy, which is of two kinds. There is one is lust and the other is wrath, right? So these were what we studied yesterday, right? So today, these are the headings under which we are going to examine today's chapter, right? So supplementing the topics, this is broadly under the 4 headings that we are going to examine the chapter today, right? We are going to see about the history of Bhagavad Gita, the nature of Krishna's activities. We are going to see if karma can affect Krishna also, right? Like yesterday, we saw that unless we sacrifice yajna, all our actions will either have good karma or bad karma, right? So we are going to examine if that rule also applies to Krishna. Then we are going to find out what is the right way to gain knowledge and what should be our approach while seeking knowledge. Right now, in addition to all that, we are going to see the difference between Lord Krishna and Lord Vishnu. It is generally considered that Krishna is the 8th avatar of Vishnu, right? So why is ISKCON so much focused on Krishna instead of Vishnu? We'll get to know that today. And tomorrow is the explanation of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Why is it the anthem of ISKCON, right? So why is it so important? Because anywhere you go to ISKCON temples, you'll always find Hare Krishna Mahamantra being chanted, right? Any devotee you find of ISKCON, you'll find him chanting, right? So why is that? What is the reasoning behind it? That we will examine tomorrow at the end of chapter 5. Okay, so today we will know what is the difference between Vishnu and Krishna, because ISKCON focuses so much on Krishna, right? So that is the broad headings. First, we examine the transcendental knowledge about Krishna. Then we see Krishna as the goal of all paths and who is the creator of Varnashrama system. So we are also going to examine on what basis is the Varnashrama system created. Varnashrama system is the classification, the 4 kinds of classification, right? And then we go into a little more detail about Karma Yoga, and then the sacrifices which lead to transcendental knowledge, and eventually we conclude with the summary of the transcendental knowledge. So all this is in today's chapter. Okay, but first we start with the history of Bhagavad Gita, right? Right. This is verse 4.1. Sulochana Mataji is there?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji, I'll make you co-host just a moment. Yes, Mataji, please carry on.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Chaturthodhyayaha Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yogaha. Shri Bhagavanuvāca Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavanaham Avyayam Vivasvan Manave Praha Manurikshvakave Bravit.
The blessed Lord said, I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god Vivaswan, and Vivaswan instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu in turn instructed it to Isvaku. Right? So Krishna himself is saying in the first verse of chapter 4 that he was the one who had instructed it to the sun god Vivaswan. Then Krishna says Vivaswan in turn passed it on to Manu, who is the father of mankind, and then Manu then passed it on to Isvaku. Right? Now, we should understand that in our Vedas, in the Vedic literature, sun god is not one person, right? Excuse me. It's like a post. It's like the post of a prime minister or a president, right? So at the time when Krishna was instructing Vivaswan, the sun god, it was to Vivasvata Manu, right? So just understand at this point that there are 14 Manus in the day of Brahma, okay? And it was Vivasvata Manu who then instructed the same science to King Isvaku. Now, King Isvaku was the king who brought it to earth, right? And he was the ancestor in whose line Lord Rama was born, right? So why is Krishna saying all this? What is the purpose behind saying this lineage, right? For why it comes from him, then it goes to the sun god, then the sun god instructs it to Manu, and then Manu gives it to Isvaku. Why is he saying this? Krishna is saying this for two main reasons. The first is that to indicate that this is not an extempore conversation which is happening between two friends. It's not like two friends are just talking um like how friends generally do, right? This is a more serious science. That's why Krishna uses the word science here, right? So this is not just philosophy, because this is science. This is something that you can experience empirically, right? And it is also spoken by Krishna. This verse is also spoken by Krishna to emphasize the importance of parampara in spiritual path. What is parampara? Parampara is the passage of the message in a recognized line, right? And not deviating from that line, and or not corrupting that message by infusing your own your own twist of the message, right? So these are the two aspects for which Krishna has narrated this sequence of the hierarchy, rather, of how the message has passed through to Isvaku, right? So that is 4.1. Let's examine 4.2. So yeah, so this is just an animation. So Krishna gives it to Vivaswan gives it to Manu gives it to Isvaku, right? So that's how the Bhagavad Gita comes to earth, right? So let's go to 4.2.
Hare Krishna.
Right.
Evam parampara praptam imam rajarshyo viduhu sakale nehamahata yogo nashta parantapa.
This supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplinic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is appears to be lost. So Krishna explains that the science of the Gita was being transmitted through disciplic succession, right? But then passage of time, the chain broke and the science was lost, because there is this thing called lost knowledge, right? There's so many instances that we can point out today also, right? So it is possible that knowledge can be lost, though acquired, it can still be lost, right? So that is what has happened here. So it's because of the disciplic chain had broken, that this science was lost. Now the emphasis here is on science. It's not some nebulous theory, right? So the important thing that this is that it is concrete science. So Krishna says, therefore it is that it had to be retold, and the person that Krishna chose to retell it to is Arjuna, right? So just understand that the point is that Bhagavad Gita is not spoken for the first time in the battlefield, right? That is clear from these two verses in chapter 4, the first and the second verse. Okay, so again the same animation, right? And then we go to the next verse, which is the broad explanation of the parampara, right? You remember the first slide I had mentioned about how Krishna was emphasizing on the importance of parampara, right? So today this is how it stands, right? So this is the qualification criteria. A spiritual guru, one who you have to choose, has to come, it will be better if it comes from one of these four paramparas, right? Because the message directly comes from Krishna to these four paramparas, right? So it's always better that you choose a spiritual guru who comes from these paramparas, right? So when the message is delivered through such a guru, that is the true Bhagavad Gita, right? So if you go to the market today, you'll come across thousands of different varieties of Bhagavad Gita, right? These days, any Tom, Dick, and Harry publish a book saying that this is the message of Bhagavad Gita. There's a book even called so many books, I don't want to name any, but then this is how it is being corrupted, because people give a twist to it, their own interpretation of the Bhagavad Gita. But then see, when you make an interpretation of Bhagavad Gita, it no longer remains the song of God, right? Bhagavad Gita literally translates to song of God. So when you make a twist to it, when the author makes a twist to it, then it is the author's song, right? It's not Krishna's song anymore. It's not Bhagwan's song, right? So therefore it is that it has to be mentioned as it is, otherwise it is corrupted, correct? So any person who interprets the Bhagavad Gita dehaws the parampara, right, and deviates from the principles stated in the parampara, is then telling about his own Gita, and it no longer is the Bhagavad Gita. Now, where is ISKCON feature here? ISKCON is from Brahma parampara. So the message from Lord Krishna went to Brahma, and then from Brahma there is an entire sequence. There's Narada, and then there is an entire line of spiritual masters, right? With the latest being Srila Prabhupada. I know we are all learning from Srila Prabhupada itself, because this book, the course that is being spoken of here, is based on the teachings of Srila Prabhupada, right? So the first way through which it comes is through Lord Brahma, right? So the leading head of this parampara is Madhvacharya. He is the guru, okay? And then we have Sri Lakshmi parampara, which is Sri parampara, right? And in that the spiritual head is Ramanujacharya, right? And then we have Rudra parampara, Lord Shiva's, in which Vishnu Swami is the leading authority. And then we have the four Kumaras, right? And in which Nimbarkacharya is the leading authority, right? So this is how the message from Lord Krishna has traveled, and because ISKCON is in the Lord Brahma parampara, it's a recognized, authorized institution, right? Right. So let's examine how Arjuna reacts to this message. 4.3. So Arjuna said, the sun god Vivaswan is senior by birth to you. How am I to understand that in the beginning you instructed this science to him, right? So another question by Arjuna. Arjuna throughout the Bhagavad Gita asks so many questions. See, that's the beauty of Vedic literature, right? It's not a commandment. Nothing you would find in the Vedas or in the spiritual texts, in the scriptures, as a commandment, right? It's always a dialogue. One person asks question and the other person replies. So it's an evolution, right? So it's not like just you do this, right? We all get questions. We all ask questions. We ask existential questions, right? Now, all these existential questions have basis, have answers in the Vedas, right? So that's a huge distinguishing factor between the Eastern thought and the Western thought, right? So in the West, the more you go towards the West, you have commandments, right? But in the more you go more to the East, you get inquiries, right? So it's more of a seeking process there than just giving a commandment and asking people to abide by it. That's the beauty of our Vedic literature, right? Right. Anyway, so what does Arjuna feel here? After Krishna says that I was the one who instructed Vivaswan, Arjuna says, but then Vivaswan is so much elder to you. He's yugas before you, right? So how is it? How am I to believe? How am I to understand that you are the one who told this message to Vivaswan, right? So next few slides, we are going to see some serious mind-blowing math, right, to find out how Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita to Vivaswan, because this is an answer to this question, right? So I need to explain that a little more. So please be a little more aware. I'll tell you the answer right away. Calculations would show the next few charts that 120 million years ago itself, Krishna had given this knowledge to Vivaswan. He had spoken about this to Vivaswan, about the Bhagavad Gita, the principles in the Bhagavad Gita to Vivaswan. Now, how is that conclusion arrived at? That 120 million years ago. How is that conclusion arrived at? That's what we are going to see in the next few slides. Now, this is a complicated calculation and it requires time to explain it fully. That is something that I don't have, right? So I actually went to consider to remove these slides, but then I thought you should be aware that there is such a calculation, right? So it is for that purpose that these calculations have been included. Now, it is all right if you don't understand it immediately, because in level 2 and level 3, we'll be dealing with this in more detail. Okay. So just know that this exists, that there is a calculation based on which you can determine that the message of the Gita was delivered 120 million years ago, and it came to Earth 20 million years ago. So that is the calculation, right? Now let's see how the calculation happens. Okay, this I'm sure you're all aware of, right? So we know that there are 4 yugas, right? The Satya Yuga, the Treta Yuga, the Dwapara Yuga, and the Kali Yuga. We've heard of this, right? Being born in India, we would automatically know all this, because we've been, somehow or the other, we get to know of this knowledge, right? So we are today in Kali Yuga, right? And this Kali Yuga, as the bottom right chart shows, bottom right part of the chart shows, is for 4,32,000 years, right? Now, if you take that as x, right? If you take x is equal to 4,32,000, then 2x is Dwapara Yuga, right? So 2 times Kali Yuga is Dwapara Yuga, 3 times the length of Kali Yuga is Treta Yuga, and 4 times the length of Kali Yuga is Satya Yuga, right? So of course the characteristics of each yuga change, but then I'm just telling you the quantum of the years, right? So this gives you a grand total of 4.32 million years, right? So 1 million is 10 lakhs. So that is 43.2 lakh years, right? So this 43.2 lakh years, which is one Divya Yuga. You see this here, right? It's called one Divya Yuga. Let me just change it also. This is called one Divya Yuga. All these 4 yugas put together is called a Divya Yuga, right? Right, now you put the 71 of such Divya Yugas, it is called a Manvantra, right? Just know that there are terms like this which measure time. So these are all terms which measure time, right? So I'm not just like how the Western thought goes. It's not just a limited measurement of time. It's enormous, right? Because we're going to talk in trillions of years now, right? So as I was mentioning, 71 of the Divya Yugas you put together, you get a Manvantra, right? Now this Manvantra is 3,067.2 lakh years, okay? That's 306.72 million years, okay? Now 14 Manvantras and 15 Sandhyas, right? Sandhyas constitute one Kalpa. That is 1 day of Brahma. So 1 Kalpa is 1 day of Brahma, right? So what does Sandhya mean? Because I mentioned 14 Manvantras and 15 Sandhyas, right? So Sandhya is like evening. We say Sandhya Vandanam, right? That's in the morning and in the evening. So Sandhya is the twilight. That's when the day ends or the day begins, right? So Sandhya here means partial distinction. In this context, it means partial distinction. That is, see, just understand that there is a total destruction and there is a partial destruction. So partial destruction happens when night falls for Brahma, right? So in the night, the material worlds are unmanifested. And when it's day, then it becomes manifested again, right? So this is about Kalpa. So there are, as I was mentioning, how many? 14 Manvantras and 15 Sandhyas put together is 1 day of Brahma, which is called a Kalpa, right? Now, 36,000 Kalpas is equivalent to the life of Brahma, right? Now that 36,000 Kalpas is equal to 311.04 trillion years, right? So that is from one point of creation to one point of full destruction. Yeah, we saw in the previous hierarchy, the previous rung of the ladder, that there is Sandhya, right? Now I mentioned Sandhya was partial destruction. That's when night falls, okay, for Brahma. But at the end of the life of Brahma, there is a full destruction, right? So that is the point of creation and the point of full destruction. Now, what must you understand is that Brahma does not have a, is not, his life is not infinite, right? So he has a starting point and he has an end point, right? So it's not infinite in that sense. That is something that we have to understand, right? So that is one slide. Now that you have understood this, that Brahma's life is very long. Now from that we can derive when the message was spoken to Vivaswan by Krishna, right? Now let me just broadly give you the conclusion itself, right? So the last line is what the conclusion is, which we just discussed, right? So life of Brahma as of today. So we say Brahma has passed 50 years. Okay, this is all calculation here, right? So today, as of now, 155.522 trillion years have passed by. Okay. And we take up from this life of Manu, right? So accepting that the birth of Manu, the Gita was spoken by Lord to his disciple, the sun god. You go to the calculations completely, you get the answer that about 120 million years ago, it was given to Vivaswan. Okay, and then from there we go on to the next stage, which is also corroborated in Mahabharata. That this is from Shanti Parva 348.51 and 52, right? So we can there also the history of Gita is traced, right? So it says, in the beginning of Treta Yuga, the millennium Treta Yuga, the signs of the relationship with the Supreme was delivered by Vivaswan to Manu. Manu became the father of mankind, gave it to his son Maharaj Ishvaku, the king of this earth planet, and the forefather of the Raghu dynasty in which Lord Ramachandra appeared. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita existed in the human society from the time of Maharaja Ishvaku, right? And therefore, you can estimate that the Gita came to this earth 2 billion years ago. Okay, but Bhagavad Gita, we can take it back to 5,000 years ago. So even going by how traditionally we estimate how time has flown from then, from the date of Bhagavad Gita being spoken of, that is 5,117 years. So this is the calculation broadly. Just know that this is the calculation which is available. We can examine it in more detail when we go up to level 2, right? So this is just the time scale for Brahma, right? So 1 second of Brahma is 100,000 years. That's 1 lakh years, right? So this is 1 lakh years in human span, human time span, right? So 1 second for Brahma is automatically 100,000 years. Okay, and it goes on. So 1 day of Brahma is also calculated that way. Okay, now we are going to examine about how Krishna answers Arjuna's question. So Arjuna was asking, how is it that you have instructed it to Vivaswan, who is way before you, who had come way before you, and who was in an entirely different yuga, right? So what does Krishna say? So Krishna says in 4.5, the personality of Godhead said, many births both you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot, O subduer of the enemy. So as we saw in 4.3, Arjuna raises the question as to how Krishna could have instructed Vivaswan when Arjuna and Krishna were contemporaries, right? At that stage, same time they were living, right? So how is it that Krishna had instructed Vivaswan? So Krishna replies in this verse that both you and I, Arjuna, have gone through many births. The problem is you don't remember, but I do, right? So that is one distincting feature of Krishna, right? He remembers, right? And it's interesting. How does Krishna appear? That's dealt with in 4.6. Although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all sentient beings, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form, right? So 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam explains the appearance of Lord Krishna, right? So when we say appearance, we specifically exclude the word birth. We never say that the Lord is born, right? We say the Lord appears, because as Krishna says, he is never born, right? He says in 4.6 that he is unborn, right? So he's never born, he only appears, right? So the distinction is maintained very clearly throughout the Vedic literature, and is specifically brought out in Srimad Bhagavatam, right? So Krishna first appears in the minds of Vasudeva and Devaki, and then settles himself in the womb. So how does he appear to Vasudeva and Devaki? He appears in the four-handed form, right? And then upon their request, he takes the two-handed form. That's the picture to your right here, right? So Krishna first appears as in the four-handed form, and then they request, Krishna, this is not proper, you should be like a child, right? So then he takes the two-handed form, right? And that's the speciality of Krishna's appearance in this form, right? In his two-handed form. So Krishna keeps coming to the material world, and we will see the reason why, right? So remember this, that Krishna is never born, he only appears, right? And Krishna says in this sloka 4.6 that he is the lord of all entities, all sentient beings, right? So every living entity, Krishna is the lord. Okay. This is from Katha Upanishad. Nityo Nityanam Chetano Chetananam. Chetanos Chetananam, right? So Katha Upanishad 2.2.13, which means that Krishna is the prime eternal among all eternals, right? So there are different kinds of eternals, and Krishna is the prime eternal. Just give me 1 second, please. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, thank you. Hare Krishna. Right, let's continue now. Brahma Samhita is very clear on this. Brahma Samhita is another scripture which deals with the aspect of the Lord, right? So Brahma Samhita or prayers offered by Brahma to Krishna, right, and is usually sung during the Abhishekam of Lord Krishna and his companions like Balaram and Subhadra, right? So in Brahma Samhita, it is said, Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami, right? So that's the ending verse of the first 3 lines are verses, and then this is always the ending line. Now we will be having it probably in our Ashtakam sessions from day after tomorrow. But just know that there is something called Brahma Samhita, right? So what I'm going to read now is from Brahma Samhita 5.33, right? So this gives the features of Krishna. Okay, so it says Advaitam, Achyutam, Anandim, Anantarupam, Adyam, Purana Purusham, Nava Yuvavam, Cha Vedusam Durlabam, Addurlabam, Atma Bhaktau, Govindam Adipurusham, Tamaham Bhajami. Now, what does this mean? Right? That's why it's color coded, right? So each word has a specific meaning, right? So Advaitam means one who doesn't have a second. So these are all Krishna's characteristics that we are dealing with, right? So, all right. And Achyutam is without decay. And Anadim is one without a beginning, right? Now we know Ananta Rupam. Ananta Rupam is whose form is endless or who possesses unlimited forms, right? And Adyam is the beginning, one who is the beginning, right? And Purana Purusham is the most ancient person. All these are qualities of Krishna. Nava Yavvanam. Nava Yavvanam means a blooming youth, right? So Krishna, when he was in battle, was I think he lived to be 125, right? He disappeared at 125. So when he was in battle, he was around in his 90s, and Mahabharata describes Krishna as the charioteer of Arjuna was looking like a 16-year-old person, right? So that is how Krishna appeared. So he is Nava Yavvanam, right? A blooming youth. Cha, of course, is always also, and Vedusu Durlabam, right? Now Krishna is difficult to reach through the Vedas, right? That's why Durlabam, okay? And Atma Bhakta Adurlabam, sorry, so therefore he is not difficult to obtain through pure devotion. Now he is difficult to obtain through Vedas, but if you have pure devotion, then he is not difficult to get, right? To reach through bhakti rather than jnana, right? To even though you may know the Vedas, it's more he is more inaccessible through the Vedas, but he is easily accessible if you are a bhakta. Through love, through pure devotion is how you get to Krishna easily, right? And then of course we have the last line, Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. That is Govinda. Govinda is the original person. Adi Purusham is the original person. Govindam is Govinda himself, Krishna, right? Tam is him, Aham is I, and Bhajami is worship, right? So what do you get from this verse? This is that he is the primeval Lord, and yet his transcendental body does not age, right? As I was mentioning, 90 years he was when he was in the war, right? And yet he looked like he was 16 years, right? So Krishna says he appears in every yuga in his transcendental form. That's what 4.6 says. That's what we saw here, right? So Krishna appears in his transcendental form. Now, why am I taking so much effort to explain this sloka? You should recall that when I mentioned in the beginning of the course that we will not be focusing on Sanskrit slokas, but then this is all full of Sanskrit, right? I want you to understand the genuineness of the message that we are trying to convey, right? So ISKCON is based on pramana. That's proof from original sources, right? So it's not just the imagination of one person, right? No, not the creativity of a person. It is from all what has been spoken of previously in our Vedas, in our scriptures, right? So this is not something which is invented. This is all there already for decades, for centuries, right? So this has truly stood the test of time. That's why these are considered to be eternal truths, right? So these are all recognized, and therefore these are all from recognized scriptures, and therefore they are indisputable, right? Okay, so that is how Krishna appears. Okay, then we go on to how when does Krishna appear? This is the famous verse I'm sure you're all aware of. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir
यदा यदा हि धर्मस्य ग्लानिर्भवति भारत अभ्युत्थानमधर्मस्य तदात्मानं सृजाम्यहम्.
Thank you, Mataji. Whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharata, and a predominant rise of irreligion, at that time I descend myself, right? So that is the external reason. I mean, doesn't require much explanation. It's very clear, right? Whenever there is adharma, Krishna says he comes to establish dharma, right? But then does Krishna has to come every time that adharma raises its head? He could have easily delegated to someone else, right? Or it's just a thought for him. He thinks and it happens, right? So why doesn't he do that? The actual reason is that he comes for the love of his devotees, because he is bound by the love of his devotees. That is the internal reason, right? Now the external reason is to establish dharma, right? The internal reason is that he is bound by the love of his devotees, and it is the love of his devotees that actually make him come every yuga, right? Right. So that the picture that you see to the right is Kamsa raising his sword to kill Devaki, right, on the day of a marriage, when he came to know that the 8th son of Devaki was to kill Kamsa, right? So that Asariri he hears, and he is not very happy with it, right? So that is a picture which was depicting that scene, right? So now let's see, why does Krishna appear? 4.8. Paritranaya sadhunam
परित्राणाय साधूनां विनाशाय च दुष्कृतां धर्म संस्थापनार्थाय संभवामि युगे युगे.
In order to deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to re-establish the principles of religion, I advent myself millennium after millennium, right? So very clear this is, isn't it? Now let's proceed further. This is okay, so this is from Srimad Bhagavatam, just taking a slight detour. Okay, what is the difference between Vishnu and Krishna, right? So Canto 1 of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 3 gives the incarnations of Krishna, right? So concluding verse of Srimad Bhagavatam in that particular chapter is Krishna's to Bhagavan Swayam. That's what is extracted here, right? The line in the red, it says Krishna's to Bhagavan Swayam, right? The first two lines are important, right? So this means that all, let me just read what Srimad Bhagavatam says in 1.3.28, right? So what chapter 3 deals with in the first canto is it lists all the avatars, right? The various forms in which the Lord has appeared, okay? And then it concludes saying that all these forms are parts of the original, and the original is Krishna himself. That's why it says Krishna to Bhagavan Swayam, right? So all the above, and let me just quote from that. So from this verse 28 from Canto 1, chapter 3 of Srimad Bhagavatam, okay? All of the above mentioned incarnations are either plenary portions or portions of the plenary portions of the Lord. But Lord Sri Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. All of them appear on planets whenever there is disturbance caused by the atheists. The Lord incarnates to protect the atheists, right? So as I was mentioning, if you just happen to go through Srimad Bhagavatam, which I strongly recommend you do, and at the end of the class, Neha Mataji,
Yes, Prabhuji.
please remind me to show them Veda Base website, no? So that has not been done, right? So I'll just show you how to access all these. This is all available on the internet. It's a site maintained by ISKCON itself. All the teachings of Srila Prabhupada are there, and we have entire Srimad Bhagavatam. It's a huge tome, right? I mean, it's got like 20,000 verses. Okay, so all this is available on the internet, and I'll just show you where it is available so that you'll be able to read it when time permits, right? So here in chapter 3, as I was mentioning, it lists all the avatars of the Lord, right? And it says that all the avatars here are either portions. That's why it says, right, portions. It says plenary portions. They are parts of the Lord, right? Or they are portions of the parts. So either they are parts or they are even smaller than that. But then it says Krishna's to Bhagavan Swayam, right? So that is the difference between Vishnu and Krishna, right? So this means that all the others are actually Krishna's incarnations. Generally, we understand that Vishnu is the god who lives in Vaikunta, who keeps incarnating, and Krishna is the eighth incarnation, right? But that is not entirely accurate as per our Shastras, right? So it says Krishna is the Supreme Lord, right? That is an indisputable fact because of Srimad Bhagavatam here, right? Society somehow infuses this with this information of the Dasavatara concept, right? But that doesn't give us actually the entire picture. This is Krishna, the Lord is not limited to just 10 avatars. Okay, Srimad Bhagavatam goes into this in great detail. There are actually 6 classifications of avatar itself, right? So we have Guna avatar, we have Leela avatar, we have Manvantra, then we have Yuga avatar, then there's one more, Shaktresha, right? That is another thing. So, like, for example, we have 3 kinds of Purusha avatars. Then there are 3 kinds of Guna avatars. There are 14 kinds of Manvantras. There are so many things, right? So all these the society doesn't say. The society only stops with saying that there are 10 avatars of Vishnu and Krishna is one of them. So that is not entirely accurate, right? Right. So we just keep that in mind. And we'll discuss all this further in chapter 7 and 8. Right. So all this we go into the Bhakti chapters. We will go into it in great detail. So just understand for the time being that this is the original position as per the Shastras, right? So that we go back from this difference between Vishnu and Krishna to the benefits of knowing about Krishna. This is 4.9. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. So this is the benefit of knowing Krishna. Krishna says that if you know this fact about my transcendental nature of my appearance and activities. So what does that mean? What does transcendental nature of appearance and activities mean? Not ordinary. So transcendental, it means it's beyond ordinary, right? So it's beyond the three material modes of nature, which is sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. So Krishna is beyond all these 3 things because he is the creator of all the 3 modes of nature, right? So he is not controlled by the 3 modes of material nature, right? So Krishna says one who understands this nature of mine is liberated, right? And upon leaving the body, goes and reaches to Krishna. He reaches his eternal abode, and there are no more births for that soul, right? So knowing Krishna, what is the benefit? It frees us from the 4 kinds of suffering. What are the 4 kinds of suffering? Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadi, right? So birth, death, old age, and disease. Now this comes in 13.8, chapter 13, verse 8. But just know that knowing Krishna would free us from all these 4 kinds of sufferings. So let's quickly see what is the difference between Krishna and us, right? So we saw in the previous verse that Krishna's body is transcendental, right? Our form is temporary. Krishna is not controlled by Maya because he is the controller of Maya, but we are controlled by Maya, right? So we act within the 3 modes of material nature, sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. But Krishna is beyond all that. And of course, Krishna's body is transcendental. It's not like how he there is a soul, and then there is a subtle body, and then there is a gross body, right? Now let me just tell you that the 3 kinds of coverings in our body. Okay, let me just show this to you. Okay, first is the soul, right? Now that then there comes the subtle body, and then you have the gross body. So we'll examine all this in detail in another chapter down the line. But just know for this purpose that there are three kinds, right? So this subtle body comprises of the false ego, mind, memory, and all that, right? And the gross body is the one that you see in the in the mirror, right? So that is the difference between Krishna and us. Krishna's form is transcendental, ours is temporary. Krishna is beyond Maya, we are controlled by Maya, right? So all this is the difference between Krishna and us, right? Brahma Samhita also says this in 5.1. Okay, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha, right? Another other Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam, right? So it says in Brahma Samhita. Now Brahma Samhita is composed by Brahma himself, right? In praise of Lord Krishna, right? So he says Ishvara Parama Krishna, right? So among all the gods, Krishna is Param, he is supreme, okay? And he says Satchidananda Vigraha. So that's what is relevant here. His body is Sat, Chit, and Ananda. What is Sat? Sat is eternal, right? What is Chit? Chit is full of knowledge, and Ananda is full of bliss, right? So he is Satchit Ananda, Satchitananda, right? And then that verse also goes on to say he is another other Govinda, right? So he is the origin of all. Another other Govinda is Govinda is the origin of all, and Sarva Karana Karanam. He is the reason. He is the prime cause of all the causes. So that is why Krishna is given that, because he is the supreme personality of Godhead, right? So that's the simple answer to it. So these are the differences between Krishna and us. We are definitely not Sat, Chit, and Ananda, right? We neither have knowledge, nor are we eternal, nor are we full of bliss, right? So what is this? What is the opposite of Ananda? Nir Ananda, right? So you ask anybody in this world, are you happy? They'll come up with some sort of a trouble, whatever be their status or their position. They'll come up with some sort of trouble. They say, no, I'm not really happy because of this and this reason. So that takes away the bliss, right? And Chit is knowledge. Of course, we are wallowing in ignorance, right? We don't even know our own scriptures. So there is no knowledge either. And then, of course, there's no dispute about it being eternal, right? We all have a maximum lifespan of 120 years in Kali Yuga, right? So we have an expiry date. All this doesn't apply to Krishna because he is Satchitananda, okay? Right. So that is the difference between Krishna and us, right? So then let's examine, does anyone in history know about Krishna? Okay, that is explained in 4.10. 4.10.
वीतरागा भयक्रोधा मन्मया मामुपाश्रिताः बहवो ज्ञानतपसा पूता मद्भावमागताः.
Being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me. And thus they all attained transcendental love for me. Right? So that is the 10th verse. Krishna says that to know Krishna, you should be free of three things. What are those three things? Vita, Raga, Bhaya, Krodha. You should be free from attachment, fear, and anger, right? So these are the things that if you are free from, you would get to know Krishna. Now Krishna says that there have been many persons in the past who have been free from those three elements and who have taken shelter of Krishna and therefore have come to know of Krishna, right? 4.11.
ये यथा प्रपद्यन्ते तांस्तथैव भजाम्यहं मम वर्त्मानुवर्तन्ते मनुष्याः पार्थ सर्वशः.
Ya yatamam prabdante is all surrender to me. As all surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Pratha. Right? So Krishna says here that he reveals uh, himself to persons according to their ability to understand. Right? So Krishna, I'll give you an example of a gushing river. Right? If anybody has been to Rishikesh or Haridwar, you know how Ganga rushes, right? There's so much force in the water which goes through, right? So Krishna is like that river. He is unlimited, right? So he just flows, right? But then the problem is how do we understand Krishna? Our knowledge is limited. Our ability to understand Krishna is limited, right? So it's like taking water from the river, we can only have so much in our hand. If we have a bigger bucket, we can hold a little more, but then we can't hold the entire river Ganga, right? So it's like that. Krishna is, he reveals himself to the most at which you can understand. Though, therefore, it is our responsibility to grow this vessel. Okay, this vessel from our hand has to become a mug, and then that mug has to become a bucket, and it has to be increased in a very logical manner. How do you do it? You have to put in your effort to increase the size of how much you're able to understand Krishna, right? So Krishna says he reveals of himself to persons in accordance with their ability to understand Krishna, right? And Krishna reciprocates the love of his devotees. The calf here in the bottom right, and Balaram on the bottom, on the top left, or are examples, right? So it is the three things, that anger, attachment, and fear, which are obstacles for us in realizing God. Okay, so that is 4.10 and 4.11. Let's see what 4.12 says. Men in this world desire success in fruitive activities, and therefore they worship the demigods. Quickly, of course, men get results from fruitive work in this world, right? So the reference here is made to something called demigods, right? So who are these demigods? Now, these demigods are administrators for Krishna, right? To maintain the work of the material world. So they are delegates, so to speak. Like, for example, we have Kuber, we have Indra, we have Agni, we have Varuna, we have Vayu. All these are all called as demigods, right? So it's imagine the hierarchy of an organization, right? You have a company, you have a chairperson in the company, you have a CEO, you have a chief financial officer, you have a HR person, then you have a operations person. So it's like that. So delegated. So Krishna delegates all of his work to these demigods, right? But keep in mind that he is the chairperson. He is the topmost, right? Krishna is the topmost. He is the maintainer of the universe. Krishna says it in so many words in the forthcoming chapters. So there's no dispute that, right? Krishna is saying it, right? So all demigods are also devotees of Krishna, right? And are subject to his wishes, right? But they are not all in all. So just understand at this stage that the demigods have limitations. They are not all in all. Their only duty is to do the work that Krishna has delegated to him. So Krishna in this verse recognize that many persons fall short of this realization, and they adopt demigod worship in order to achieve their material requirements. No, so what happens? So instead of going and worshiping Krishna, because we need immediate relief, instant coffee, right? I mean, coffee initially we used to have filter coffee, if you all recall, right? Now that percolates, it takes a lot of time, right? But then what happens? We came up with instant coffee, right? Because it takes, like, it's like Maggie, right? 2 minute Maggie, right? So in order to get quick results, we go and worship these demigods, forgetting this fact that the demigods are actually representatives or delegates of Lord Krishna himself, right? So the maximum that these delegates can do is take your prayers to Krishna. That is all they can do. They cannot give. Krishna says, in fact, in chapter 7, that the demigods are not the ones who actually give what you're praying for. It is coming from Krishna himself, right? So Krishna says there's no point praying to the demigods. But then what happens when you pray to the demigods? Also Krishna says in chapter 7. So let's deal with it in chapter 7. So this is where for the first time in the Bhagavad Gita, demigods are introduced in the Bhagavad Gita, right? This is in chapter 4 verse 12. So we will deal with it in detail in chapter 7. Okay. So just understand the concept of demigods for the time being, that they are all delegates of Krishna, right? Okay, so this is important verse 4.13, 4.13.
चातुर्वर्ण्यं मया सृष्टं गुणकर्म विभागशः तस्य कर्तारमपि मां विद्य कर्तारमव्ययम्.
According to the three modes of material nature and the work ascribed to them, the four divisions of human society were created by me. And although I am the creator of the system, you should know that I am yet the non-doer, being unchangeable. So Krishna cares for all living things, right? And he encourages them to reach him, right? Now, how does he do this? In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has explained several ways, has mentioned several ways to reach him. But the problem is, this is a practical difficulty. How many of us actually understand what Krishna is trying to tell us, right? First, we have to understand those ways. And even if we understand, how many of us actually implement what Krishna is saying, right? So what happens is, Krishna thought, all right, so this is the difficulty, all right, this is a practical difficulty, I understand what is going on. So let me create a society in which, by the very functioning of the society, a person can reach Krishna, right? So therefore it is that Krishna created the Chaturvarnyam. Okay. Now this Chaturvarnyam is the classification of the intelligentsia, the protectors, the traders, and the service class, right? The Brahmanas, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Shudras, right? Now, merely by living life according to the Varnashrama and by doing all the prescribed duties without attachment, Krishna enables all the living things all living beings to reach him, right? And frees them from this cycle of birth and death, right? That is the idea behind Chaturvarnyam, right? That this we have to first understand very clearly, right? So Chaturvarnyam is not based on some fanciful division of the society, right? Now, second line here is very important, right? So the first line is Chaturvarnyam Maya Shreshtam. That is, I was the one who introduced, who made this Chaturvarnyam, this four classifications. So Krishna establishes that first, that Chaturvarnyam is his creation, it is his concept, right? And second line, Guna Karma Vibhasaha, is very important, right? Why is it very important? Because it gives you the basis on which this Chaturvarnyam is based. Krishna says this Chaturvarnyam, which has been created by me, is based on two grounds, two reasons, two bases, right? What is the basis? There are two elements. One is Guna, and the second is Karma. Okay. Now, what is Guna? Guna is the material mode which is prominent, right? And work is accordingly ascribed to that person. See, supposing a person is a Rajasic person, then he is more inclined to be a Kshatriya, right? If a person is a Sattvic person, he is more inclined to belong to a Brahmin family, the intelligentsia, right? So on and so forth. Supposing a person is Tamasic, right? That is a mode of ignorance, right? So that is the line of duties which are assigned is suitable to that kind, right? That is the Guna, right? They are governed by the three material modes of nature. And then you of course have the karma, that depends upon your past activities, right? Now the most important thing that you must note here is, Krishna does not say about Janma. It doesn't say Janma, Guna, Karma, Vibhasaha, right? It just says Guna and Karma. Now, what has happened as time has passed by, vested interests in the society has introduced, slowly infused Janma. That is, the moment you are born in a particular family, you get that trait. That is not how Krishna has established this Chaturvarnyam, right? He says only two things are the basis of Chaturvarnyam. What is it? Guna and Karma. But the problem is, we have gone and corrupted this system that Krishna has given. Now, what was the reason behind it? As I mentioned, the reason to introduce this was that the mere existence of a person in the society would automatically take him to Krishna, right? Merely by existing in a society which is based on this Chaturvarnyam, a person is automatically supposed to reach the abode of Krishna. But then we have corrupted it, right? The moment you introduce Janma, you're born in a particular family, and therefore it is that your nature would be so and so. That is a that's a fundamental corruption to the basis on which this was created, right? So that has pretty much vanquished eradicated this system entirely from the society. Today, Srimad Bhagavatam in fact predicts this, that in the Kali Yuga, anyone who is born is a Shudra. It says Kalo Shudra Sambhava. Kalo Shudra Sambhava. Canto 12 of Srimad Bhagavatam says Kalo Shudra Sambhava. That is, it has predicted even then that anyone who is born in the Kali Yuga is a Shudra, right? So just understand that when it was initially introduced, this Chaturvarnyam, point of birth was entirely irrelevant, and it is subsequently introduced, and which has corrupted the system. Okay, and that is why the system is not very effective in the present day and age, right? Okay, so that is 14.13. Let's proceed further. 14.14.
न मां कर्माणि लिम्पन्ति न मे कर्म फले स्पृहा इति मां योऽभिजानाति कर्मभिर्न स बध्यते.
There is no work that affects me, nor do I aspire for the fruits of action. One who understands this truth about me also does not become entangled in the fruitive reactions of work, right? So Krishna here is saying that there is no work which is ascribed to him. Yesterday we saw the three verses set, correct, where Krishna says that in spite of there being no work prescribed to me, I continue to do my work because the general populace would follow me, and if I do not do my work, they will also not work. That was yesterday, verses 22 to 24, if you remember, right? So the automatic corollary is that there is no karma for Krishna's action, right? Because Krishna has not been prescribed any works. He is the one who gives the prescription in the Vedas, right? So for him, there is no work. And since there is no work for Krishna, karma does not affect Krishna. And you should also recall that karma is something which is created by Krishna. It's a Maya, right? So that is created by Krishna. So he doesn't fall within that realm of karma and good karma and bad karma and all that, right? We are the ones who are dependent on the fruits of our action, and for that we are forced to work, right? It is by our work that we keep our body and soul together, right, to get rid of that karma, right? But for Krishna, that's not the point. Says, for example, to take the slideshow itself here, right? So all these are instances of Krishna acting according to his prescribed duty. Krishna's service to Saudama, right? And then Krishna attacking Bhishma on the battlefield, Krishna tending to his 9 lakh cows, acting as the charioteer of Arjuna. All these are divine acts. They cannot be compared to our mundane activities, right? Krishna works, but then his work is to give pleasure to his devotees. That is the essential feature of Krishna. So in that way also Krishna is essentially different, obviously different from us, right? So this concept that we are going to go and merge with Krishna, that I am God and all that is entirely untrue, right? Our purpose, the purpose of the soul, we will see in the Bhakti chapters, is to be engaged in devotional service to Lord Krishna, right? That is the purpose of a soul. That is the end product of the soul. That is the goal of the soul, right? Right. So let's see 14.17. This is the classification of karma, vikarma, and akarma. 14.17.
कर्मणो ह्यपि बोधव्यं च विकर्मणः अकर्मणश्च बोधव्यं गहना कर्मणो गतिः.
Right, so this is an important sloka. This is where Krishna explains what is karma, what is vikarma, and what is akarma. Okay, so karma, as we saw yesterday, day before also, the first class also, karma is just activity. It means literally, it means action, activity, right? And vikarma, on the other hand, is forbidden activity. Okay, akarma is action without inaction. Okay, so the example is devotional service to Krishna. Akarma does not create karma. Okay, that's why it's called akarma, right? So Krishna says that intricacies of, okay, the translation of this comes in the next sloka. I'll just tell you what it means though. Intricacies of action are very hard to understand, right? Because of this, it is that not much importance is given to this as a method for reaching the Lord, right? So the problem is, okay, and this is the translation. We are at 14.17, right? The intricacies of action are very hard to understand. Therefore, one should know properly what action is and what forbidden action is and what inaction is. Okay, so that's what Krishna deals with in this sloka. Okay, and that's why because this the problem is because of this intricacy of action, we may think that we are doing a good deed, but then it in reality may be something which creates bad karma. So that is the problem with karma yoga, and that is why it is not given that elevated status of bhakti yoga, right? Because we are not able to understand what is the consequence of our action. We may think, as I was mentioning, that we are doing a good deed, but then it may backfire, right? So that is the problem with the karma yoga, right? So this is the broad characteristics of vikarmis. Who is a vikarmi? One who engages in forbidden activities. So what are the characteristics? He does not follow the Vedas. He risks being degraded to lower species. He is not appreciated by saintly people, and he defeats the purpose of life. So this is something that we have to avoid, right? So we should never be a vikarmi, right? We should be engaged in akarma. Okay, so let's see what karmis are first. Okay, so who are karmis? Karmis are those who follow Vedas and are also pious. They attain swarga, and they sometimes even get the bodies of demigods. But the problem is they eventually come back to the Mratya Loka. This is the Mratya Loka, right? Mratya Loka is so called because you have this problem of birth and death, the cycle of birth and death. So just imagine this to be a fixed deposit. So if you do good karma, you go to Swarga, right? And as your good karma is spent there, you come back to this place, right? And then the entire rigmarole continues, right? Now our purpose is to go beyond Swargaloka, right? Satyaloka is the highest loka, right? So this is this journey of worlds above is not limited to the purpose of life. The purpose of life, for the soul at least, is to go beyond this and go back and serve the Lord Almighty Krishna, right? So that is the purpose of the soul. Okay, now let's see what akarma is. Okay, now akarma is persons who have come to the platform of devotional service to Krishna, right? And they know that fruitive activities binds and means rebirth. So they know about all these, and these are the three classifications on which our actions are based. And this now we go to 4.34, very important verse. 4.34.
Hare Krishna. तद्विद्वि प्रणिपातेन परिप्रश्नेन सेवया उपदेक्षन्ति ते ज्ञानं ज्ञानिनस्तत्त्वदर्शिनः.
Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because he has seen the truth, right? So actions and their consequences, as I mentioned, are hard to understand, right? So how do we try and resolve that? We have to approach a spiritual master. This is the verse which gives the answer to this question as to how to resolve and understand what is actually good action and what causes no karma, and how do we engage in activities which cause no karma, right? So how do you get that knowledge? You have to get that knowledge only from a spiritual master, right? And how do you get it from him? You have to inquire from him submissively, right? And you have to render service onto him, right? So first important thing is you have to identify a spiritual master, right? So next two things that is mentioned here is pariprashneya sevaya, right? That is, you have to inquire submissively and render a service onto him. Sevaya is service, right? So you should never challenge your teachers, right? Direct challenge. You should never tell them that you are wrong, right? Because what happens is sometimes wisdom dawns for us later. We may know for sure 100% that what the teacher doesn't is saying is completely wrong. We know it for sure as a fact that what is being said is wrong, right? Even then, the scriptures say that you should not challenge him, because what happens as you grow in wisdom, eventually you will realize that what the teacher said was actually right. Okay, so at that point of time, when the teacher says something, it may not be appealing to you. You may feel that it is conflicting with your view, right? But then still the scriptures say you should not challenge your teacher, right? Like you remember in the first chapter, what Duryodhana did with Dronacharya, right? He went and taunted him, right? That sort of a approach to a teacher is completely disregarded, right? By the Vedic scriptures. Right? We should realize this, that sometimes wisdom dawns late, right? That is a shortfall in in ourselves rather than the teachers, right? So intelligence is not also about asking random questions, trying to test if a person knows the answer, right? That helps no one. It neither helps the person who is asking those questions, nor does it help the person who is answering those questions, right? So you should first realize what is it that you know, and the important thing is applying what you know, right? So that is what is important. Now this sloka also gives the quality of the spiritual master, right? He should be one who is self-realized. Now all that I have been mentioning applies to a person who is self-realized, right? It's not any teacher who can claim to be a teacher, right? That teacher must be a a self-realized soul. That's you see the third last line, right? The self-realized soul can impart knowledge onto you because he has seen the truth. So unless that spiritual master is one who is self-realized and who has seen the truth, these are the two qualifications. This is the test that a person who claims to be a spiritual master has to ask himself: am I self-realized? Do have I seen the truth? If the answer to both the questions are yes, then you can take up the mantle of a spiritual guru. Otherwise, you are not a spiritual guru, right? So these are all aspects that you will have to consider when you're choosing a spiritual guru. It's a very, very important thing, because without a spiritual guru, we are not going to understand what the Shastras speak, what the Vedic scriptures speak, right? So this role of a spiritual master is very important. And as I was saying, one of the easiest things that you can do in choosing a spiritual master is choose one from any of those four paramparas which we started with in the class, right? So I've gone overboard with time. Another 2-3 minutes and we'll conclude. This is the last verse, 3.42. Therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, O Bharata, stand and fight. Right? So Krishna again reverts back to Arjuna's question. Which question? The question by which chapter 3 commenced, right? Ekam Vada. Arjuna asks, tell me one, right? Should I renounce or should I fight? Right? So, Krishna gives the answer here again, that this doubts that you have arisen in your heart are all out of ignorance, right? So you should slash it with the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, therefore, Bharata, stand and fight, is what Krishna concludes this chapter with, right? So tomorrow is another very interesting chapter, right? We'll get to that. So chapter 4 summary, just a quick overview of what we studied. We started off with the transcendental knowledge about Krishna, right? We saw the history of Bhagavad Gita and how the message has percolated, how it's been passed off from one to another in a disciplinic succession, right? Then we saw about the nature of Krishna. When Krishna comes, what are the benefits of knowing Krishna, how he appears, and his transcendental body, all that we saw today, right? So that's all about transcendental knowledge. And then we saw about the Varnashrama system. Okay, and then we saw about Karma Yoga, that the sacrifices which leads to transcendental knowledge, and the summary of transcendental knowledge, which is broadly the entire chapter, correct? Though specifically you will find it between 34 to 42. So these are the verses. You see the second column, the references. So those are given. Supposing you want to know more about a particular heading, please take the effort to go through those verses. So and the purport. I hope you by now you're all procured a copy of this Bhagavad Gita as it is book. So if you haven't, please do procure. This is a book which has to be on your desk, okay, because it truly gives you guidance to any problem that you have in life. You get the answer from here, right? So I request you all to please do procure a copy and keep it on your desk, and please keep reading, because as in when we complete a chapter, when it is fresh in your mind, just go through the chapters, the verses, the verses which we have not touched upon today, and you'll get the complete picture. Okay. So with that, we conclude today's chapter. Guru Pranam. As always, Om Angyanatimirandasya Jnananjana Salakya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Tomorrow is chapter 5, right? So does spirituality means renunciation? That is what is the central message of chapter 5, right? So we examine what is true renunciation and how does it compare with karma, okay? Is it it's if you see actually 3, 4, 5, 5 and 6 to a certain extent are all continuations of the entire Bhagavad Gita is a conversation between two people, right? So in that sense, it's a continuation of a conversation, but there are distinct compartmentalization which is possible, which is why I told you, right? The first 6 chapters are about Karma Yoga, the middle 6 chapters are about Bhakti Yoga, and the last 6 chapters are about Jnana Yoga, right? So 3, 4, and 5 are broadly a continuation from one another, right? So even the names of the chapters are going to be similar. Tomorrow also is going to be karma. Okay. So both chapter 3 and chapter 5 deal in detail with Karma Yoga, right? And there will also be a little of storytelling from Srimad Bhagavatam, right? Then Tomorrow we also will get to understand the formula for peace. Okay, and after class we are going to examine the Mahamantra, the history of the Mahamantra. So tomorrow is also the Mahamantra special. So please do not miss class tomorrow. Right? Hare Krishna.
Om
Can we
Tat
stop
Sat
sharing?
Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gitasu Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yogo Nama Chaturthodhyayah. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Thank you so much, Mataji, for your service. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Now we have Amrita Mataji, I believe.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. I'll make a co-host. So 1 second.
Okay.
Amrita Mataji. Yes, Mataji, got you. Okay, done. Mataji, before you start the Ashtakam, I just wanted to ask the devotees before anyone leaves. I hope you are all doing the quizzes. Is that all
Yes,
going?
sir. Yeah, it's going well.
Okay. Any problems? Any difficulties with the quiz? I hope
I
not.
didn't find any problem.
Okay.
First, we'll have to register and then enroll ourselves and then continue the quiz.
Yeah. So if there's any problem, just raise your hand and then we will take you up in the question and answer session. Okay. Thank you so much. Yes, Amrita Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Krishna prema mahi Radha, Radha prema mayo hari. Krishna prema mahi Radha, Radha prema mayo hari. जीवनेन धनेन नित्यं राधा कृष्ण गतिर्मम जीवनेन धनेन नित्यं राधा कृष्ण गतिर्मम कृष्णस्य द्रविणं राधा राधाय द्रविणं हरि जीवनेन धनेन नित्यं राधा कृष्ण गतिर्मम कृष्ण प्राणमयी राधा राधा प्राणमयो हरि जीवनेन धनेन नित्यं राधा कृष्ण गतिर्मम कृष्ण द्रावमयी राधा राधा द्रावमयो हरि जीवनेन धनेन नित्यं राधा कृष्ण गतिर्मम कृष्ण गेहे स्थिता राधा राधा गेहे स्थितो हरि जीवनेन धनेन नित्यं राधा कृष्ण गतिर्मम कृष्ण चेत स्थिता राधा राधा चेत स्थितो हरि जीवनेन धनेन नित्यं राधा कृष्ण गतिर्मम नीलांबरधर राधा पीतांबरधरो हरि जीवनेन धनेन नित्यं राधा कृष्ण गतिर्मम वृंदावनेश्वरी राधा कृष्ण वृंदावनेश्वर जीवनेन धनेन नित्यं राधा कृष्ण गतिर्मम कृष्ण प्रेममयी राधा राधा प्रेममयो हरि हरे कृष्ण
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji. Thank you. Okay. Questions?
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare
Thank you
Krishna,
for the
Mataji.
wonderful
Yes, thank
answer.
you very much, Mataji. Yes,
Prabhuji,
Mataji.
would you like to do that revision first or Veda-based website visit?
Is there any question from the devotees? Because unless there's a question, then I don't think there's a problem. I mean, about the if they're all doing the quiz, then there's not a problem, right? Unless they have difficulties,
There's a question, Prabhuji, that one Mataji is asking, Lekha Mataji is asking that
Mhm.
she is not able to enroll in the quiz.
Okay, okay. Neha Mataji, you have time today. Would you like to do the demo then?
Prabhuji,
So
I'm
can I
not.
interrupt in between?
Yes, Mataji, please, please.
Sure.
Go ahead.
We cannot enroll unless we register ourselves. First, we'll have to register and then enroll.
Okay, okay. So what we will do is we can schedule a date, Mataji, if subject to your convenience, Neha Mataji. Can we do it tomorrow?
Yes, Prabhuji, I can
Okay,
try.
okay, okay, Mataji. Either before class or after, so subject to your convenience. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, we have any questions from the chapter today?
Yes, Prabhuji, there are questions. Prabhuji, would you like to take that Veda-based visit? What you asked
Oh yes, yes. Thank you for reminding me. So I wanted to show the devotees this website. So let me share my screen first. Where is Chrome? Right here it is. Okay, now I'm sure to be visible. So we go and type Veda base here, right? So the site is called Veda base. You just search for search in Google for Veda base, and you give enter, and you get to this the first result, right? So this is the online Veda base. This site is called vedabase.io. Okay, so you just click on the first link, and you get to this page, right? Now, this is Bhakti Vedanta Vedabase, right? The topmost source of spiritual knowledge, it says. Right. Now, this is a library of sorts, right? Because now you have the entire series of books here. Let me show you all the books that's available. Okay, then. So all of these are books, right? So this is the book we are dealing with right now. So Bhagavad Gita as it is what we are studying, right? So this is what I was mentioning about. Srimad Bhagavatam is an elaborate scripture, right? So there are how many 12 cantos and nearly 20,000 verses, right? So all these verses have been translated, and all these verses have been given a commentary also. There's a puppet attached to every verse, right? So just open any I mean any one, you have several chapters. Okay, and each chapter, if you go and just click, for example, chapter 19, you get all this, the reason, the history. You get the texts here also. What you're seeing here is the translation of the text, right? But if you want to know it more in detail, you click on the text here, and you get the original verse, the Sanskrit verse, then the transliteration, and then you get the synonyms for each of the verse, then the translation of the verse, English translation of the verse, and then the purport, right? So this is a gift by Srila Prabhupada for entire mankind, for because otherwise not all of us are very familiar with Sanskrit, right? It is a language which is not very much in use, correct? This is not very much in day-to-day use, at least. It's not as used frequently as any of the other languages, right? So this translation gives us, but then the problem is, of course, this is Deva Bhasha, right? Sanskrit. So all our scriptures are in mostly in Sanskrit, right? So that has been translated beautifully by Srila Prabhupada, right? So it is made accessible for us in this present day and age where English is more prevalent. He has translated it into English, and thereafter it has been translated into so many languages. For example, Bhagavad Gita as it is, there is a version even in Hebrew, right? Hebrew language. That's the language in which the Bible was originally given, right? So even in that language, we have Bhagavad Gita as it is. And we have also several other books, right? So we have the Science of Self-Realization, which is again a wonderful explanation of what ISKCON is all about, right? And how to go about choosing a spiritual guru. All those, for example, I'll just show it to you here itself. So you have an entire chapter on on how to choose a spiritual guru. See, chapter 2 is choosing a spiritual master. So all these are all as we go more and more in detail, all these become relevant. And this is Srila Prabhupada's biography, right? So as I was mentioning in the first session, Srila Prabhupada had forbidden any of his devotees from writing about him, because for him Krishna was always front and center, right? So it is only after his disappearance this book was, this his biography was written, right? And then we examine each of the teachings of Srila Prabhupada in these books. For example, this book is entirely about the teachings of Queen Kunti, right? Then we have Sri Isa Upanishad, which is part of Yajurveda. Then we have the teachings of Lord Kapila. All these books are available for reading. All you have to do is allot time to read, right? That finding time is what is important. So all of these books are available. See, Mahabharata is available. Ramayana is available. All this is important. These are all our scriptures, right? Our main scriptures. There's Mahabharata, there's Ramayana, then there's of course the Nectar of Devotion, and the other one is Nectar of Instruction. So all these are more advanced levels, right? So we go through it in chapter 2. Sorry, level 2, sorry. And we of course have Brahma Samhita here, which I quoted from today, right? So this is Brahma Samhita. So all these are available. So please explore the website when it is possible, and please read. Unless you take the effort, it's not easy to understand Krishna, because they're trying to understand Godhead, right? So it's going to require some amount of effort from your end too, right? So that is a site which gives you all the details, all the texts. Okay, thank you so much, Mataji, Nehamati, for reminding, because I completely slipped my mind. Thank you so much. Right. Any questions from
Prabhuji, yeah. First question is by Brijesh Prabhuji. Why did Krishna choose Arjuna to deliver the science of Bhagavad Gita?
Oh, okay. Okay, there's a long answer to this and there's a short answer. I'll give you the short answer first. The short answer is because Arjuna is Krishna's devotee. There's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita further down, 9, I think, chapter 9, if memory serves, where Krishna says the reason why I'm actually saying this to you is because you are my devotee, right? So Krishna gives the reason in the Bhagavad Gita itself. But now the longer answer. Now, the longer answer is Krishna. There are several questions which are actually surrounding this. There are questions which are like, why did Krishna speak the message to Arjuna? Had he gone and told it to Duryodhana, he could have prevented the entire war. So why is it that he had to go and tell this to Arjuna? If he had explained the position to Duryodhana, who is the one who is actually causing all this trouble, the entire war would not have happened, right? There are also questions like that. There are people who think like that. We have to understand something, because you can only tell things to persons who listen to you, right? Now, it is because Arjuna was Krishna's devotee that the message of the Gita was given to Arjuna, okay? And Arjuna was also Krishna's dearmost friend, if you remember, right? So that is another reason. But importantly, Duryodhana specifically did not listen to Krishna. If you're familiar with Mahabharata, there is just before the war, Krishna goes as the ambassador to explain the position of Pandavas to Duryodhana, to the Kauravas, right? So the offer from Krishna is, at least you give us five villages, right? And then Duryodhana comes out and says, no, I will not even give you the land on which a pin can be placed upon, right? So, and then when Arjuna is explaining, when Krishna is acting as the ambassador for the Pandavas and explaining explaining dharma to Duryodhana, that you have to avoid this war. This war is not going to be good for you, right? He actually tries and arrests Krishna. Okay, so Duryodhana is such a person, right? And there was no one else that who would listen to Krishna in the Kauravas side, right? And being the charioteer of Arjuna was the nearest person, and all these reasons that the best reason is that he is a devotee of Krishna. He is a friend of Krishna, and Krishna also is the charioteer, so he is nearby. And Arjuna is having all these doubts. It's not Duryodhana who is having these doubts, right? Duryodhana is raring to fight. He wants to go kill everyone here, right, on the battlefield. But then it's Arjuna who is having this hesitation. He drops the Gandiva bow and he says, I don't know what to do. Krishna, instruct me. He surrenders to Krishna. And therefore it is that Krishna explains all this message of the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. Duryodhana never surrendered to Krishna. If you recall Mahabharata also, Duryodhana never surrenders to Krishna, right? So it's only Arjuna who surrenders to Krishna, right? There is a specific verse in chapter 18. It says, Sarma Dharman Parityajya Mam Ekam Saranam Vyaja. Surrender onto me. So it's only when Arjuna surrenders to Krishna that that Krishna gives the message. Right? Had Duryodhana surrendered to Krishna, well, who knows? Things would have been different. But that's not how that's not the nature of Duryodhana itself, right? So that is the reason. That's the longer answer for your question. The short answer is straightforward. Arjuna is a devotee of Krishna, and therefore it is that the message of the Gita was given to Arjuna and not to anyone else, right? Hare Krishna. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, Prabhuji. Then there are questions related to quiz doubts there.
Okay, so we'll deal with it tomorrow then. We'll just give them a broad demonstration, Mataji.
Yeah, sure, Prabhuji. Okay. Then Raghav Prabhuji asks, okay, now. It's a question by Vidya Mataji. How do we follow signs of practical uses of Gita? These busy schedules of commemorative and business era, where we get irritated with creating by others as well as doing creating and misguide others. Is it difficult to be simple way of living?
I didn't understand the last line. What was the last line? Is it difficult to be?
Is it difficult to be simple way of living?
Oh no. That's quite a contradiction in terms, isn't it? Is it difficult to be, the very concept that it is simple shouldn't make it difficult, right? So what do you say? Simple living and high thinking, right? So that is what is required. But broadly, what your question I understand is how do you implement this on a practical level, correct? That is your question. So see, this takes first of all, the fact that you're all attending a Bhagavad Gita class shows that you have taken the first step. You've shown interest in knowing the message of the Gita. So unless you know something, you will not be able to implement it, right? Now that you are attending the class, so you've taken the first step, right? Now the next step is to understand what the teachings are of the Bhagavad Gita. So once you understand what the teachings of Bhagavad Gita is, then comes the third step. The third step is implementing them. Now, yesterday I was telling you to surrender all your work, all your food to Krishna before you do anything, right? What are I supposed to do? You have to think of Krishna once, and you have to say Krishna Arpanam. I dedicate all this. I sacrifice to you, to this Krishna, to you, and then you do your best. No, that's a very simple way of implementing things. And if you start doing that, you cover 90% of your duties, right? So 90%, at least 75%, let's say, in the present stage in which of life in which this present audience is in, is spent in studying, right? Studying and then playing. You have sports and all that, right? So your 90% of your time is spent on this, right? Now, if you follow what I mentioned yesterday, it's a very simple thing. As I mentioned, think of Krishna before you start any duty, any work which is prescribed. Just think of Krishna and say, Krishna, I'm doing this for you. Please accept it. I'm doing this as a sacrifice to you. Please accept it. And then you do your best, right? And you satisfy Krishna. That is following the Bhagavad Gita, right? So it is a very simple exercise. As I was mentioning yesterday, it's consistency that matters. So it's not just you think about it once and then forget about it the next day, right? So you have to, whenever you start something, you have to keep doing it, right? So these are things as you go forward, you will get more and more lessons, right? So I'll specifically use the word takeaway from a chapter when it is important, which can be implemented. And I also mentioned how you get to implement it. Like yesterday, the takeaway from the chapter was that you have to think of Krishna, surrender your work to Krishna, right? So that is what is important. So implementing what you understand. So the third step, as I was mentioning, the first is to of course try and understand. The second is to understand the message. The third is to implement what you have understood. Now, as you implement this, initially it will be difficult, but as I wouldn't say difficult, it will be challenging, because there will be circumstances which come in the way. There will be obstacles which come in the way, because you are trying to change your style of living, right? Your way of life. So initially there will be challenges, but you will have to overcome those challenges. And Krishna, when he sees that you are trying to adopt the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, will always intercede on your behalf, and he would remove those obstacles, right? So these are things that you have to do it in a practical way. So the first step would be to understand what is being said in the class, right? The message of the Gita. So if you understand this, you have like covered 50%, and then the other 50% is implementing it. Okay, so understand and implement. That is all it is to it. I hope I broadly answered the question.
Yes,
Please
Prabhuji.
tell me if
Hare
I've gone on a
Krishna.
tangent.
Yeah. Hare Krishna, Raghav Prabhuji. You can unmute yourself.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Radha Prabhu.
Prabhuji, first please accept my humble obeisances and continuous Dandar Pranam in your lotus feet.
Oh my God. No, that is all for a guru. I'm not a guru. So please don't take me to that
No,
point.
no,
Okay. I'm
no,
just here
Prabhuji,
to
you are
convey the message of the Gita to you. That is all.
explaining the Bhagavad Gita to us in such a beautiful way. You are also Guru, sir.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. But go ahead, please. Don't call me guru.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Prabhuji, I am asking that as you have explained that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, even upper than the Vishnu. But sir, this is I think one of the biggest lies told to us from our childhood, that Vishnu is the supreme God and Krishna is his avatar. Sir, now Prabhuji, I am asking that how to deal with those who tell that Vishnu is the super God and Krishna is avatar.
You have
How
understood
to
it,
deal
right?
with them?
So
Yes, sir.
you have understood it, right?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay. So Bhagavad Gita. See, this is not directly from the Gita, though I did advert to it in the class. Okay, so this comes actually from Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, as
Yes,
I
sir.
mentioned,
Yes,
chapter
sir.
3, right? But I'll answer you from Bhagavad Gita. Okay, chapter 18, Krishna specifically says, do not give this message of the Gita to a person who doesn't believe. Right? Krishna says faith is the most important thing when you are on the spiritual path, right? Now, if you are going to tell someone that this is what the scriptures say, and they say no, then there's no point telling them, right? If you're going to dispute what the scriptures say, then what remains? There's nothing which remains, right? So it is that when a person disputes, when the scriptures say that Krishna is the one who is saying the Bhagavad Gita, there are people who
Yes,
say,
Prabhuji.
no, Krishna is a combination of several people. How is it that he spoke it on a battlefield when there are people about to fight? There are so many questions like this which are raised. Now, all these people dispute the fact that it was Krishna who is speaking on the battlefield. Now, what do you tell to those people? Bhagavad Gita says, don't tell them anything. It's not possible for them to understand the message. Try to explain it. If they're not able to understand, leave it at that. See, but what happens when you try to explain it to these people? They start making fun of the message. Now, that is a a huge offense, right? Which constitutes a grave sin. So we should not aid in that sin. So the moment you start explaining and they start disputing, you should keep quiet. Just leave it. Self-realization will come. It may take many janmas. Perhaps they are not yet discharged that burden of karma, and they have perhaps not come to that level of self-realization that they should not dispute the shastras, right? Now, if you're going to dispute the shastras, then you should, the person who's speaking about that message should realize that they have not come to that level. And they should just say, all right, fine. You have a point, you have a version, I have a version. You when you get to that level of self-realization, perhaps you realize, and that level of self-realization may take yugas, right? Birth, and you have this cycle of birth and death, right? So unless you get that realization, you are not going to break free from it. And we will see in the bhakti chapters, right? Unless you involve yourself in devotional service, you're not going to break that cycle of birth and death, right? Doing good deeds is only going to elevate you maximum to Satya Loka, which is Brahma's Loka, right? So there you get to live a comfortable life. So instead of a dirty plate in planet Earth, there in Satya Yuga, you get a clean plate. That's the only difference. Perhaps you get an extra roti and some extra dal, right? But then you don't get to serve Krishna. That is the dharma of the soul, right? Now, all these are high philosophies, right? Now, it'll be difficult to understand initially, but then you should never dispute. Just understand the message. And as you are on the path, just remain on the path. And as you are on the path, realization will come to you, right? But then to stay on this path itself, your karma must permit. Unless your karma permits, you will not be able to understand a word of Bhagavad Gita. In fact, Dhritarashtra never understood what the Bhagavad Gita meant. in spite of Sanjaya explaining to him what is being spoken of, Sanjaya's opinion is spoken of in chapter 18. Sanjaya says, my hairs are standing on the end when I think of the message that Krishna has given. But there's no such equivalent verse to Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra did not understand the Bhagavad Gita itself because he was not in that frame of mind, you see. So to answer your question, that what do you do? How do you explain this concept to them? You try explaining. If they don't agree, leave it at that. It's not for them to understand at this point of time. They will understand it at a later point of time. So we'll just have to leave it at that. Never force. See, for that matter, Krishna never forces. I'll give you another example from chapter 18. There's so many beautiful verses from chapter 18. Krishna,
Yes,
after
Prabhuji.
he explains the entire principles, all the lessons of the Bhagavad Gita, he does not tell Arjuna, see, I've told you all this. This is all transcendental wisdom. So do according to what I say. He doesn't say that. He says, Arjuna, I've told you all the important lessons. I've given you the wisdom. Now it is up to you to whether to act or not. So he says, Yate icha tatakuru, right? That comes in verse 63. I think 63 is of chapter 18 is where Krishna says, Yate icha tatakuru. So even to Arjuna, after he has given all this wisdom, he doesn't force his viewpoint that he must fight to Arjuna, right? So he tells Arjuna, this is what it is. Please try and understand and do your duty. Okay. And then it takes another 10 verses of this conversation between Arjuna and Krishna before Arjuna concludes Karishe Vachanam Tava. I understand what you are saying, Krishna. All my doubts have been dispelled. I shall execute your order. Right. So even to Arjuna, who is so very close to Krishna, Krishna does not force himself upon. So when that is the amount of free will that Krishna has given to us, that should be what should inspire us when we are trying to spread the word of the Lord. Now, if a person is going to dispute the word of the Lord, what do you tell them? Tell them, okay, let's wait. Let's hope you realize you come to that level, and then
Okay.
perhaps you will understand. Right?
Okay, Prabhuji. Thanks for such nice explanation. One thing more, Prabhuji, I want to ask.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sir, what is the difference between Vaikuntha, Bhagavad Dham, and Golok Vrindavan? What
Okay,
the
these are
idea
high
behind all these?
concepts. See, okay, so we will be dealing with Goloka chart. Okay, but first I must say what Goloka is. See, this comes in the chapters, but anyway, I'll just tell you what broadly it is. Krishna in the two-handed form is in Goloka Vrindavan. Okay, that is the most intimate form, like how Krishna is when he appeared in the transcendental body that he had during in Mahabharata. How he appears, he is in Goloka Vrindavan in that form. So all the pastimes between him and the devotees, which gives so much joy to Krishna and to his devotees, happen in Goloka Vrindavan. So that is Krishna there. Now, Krishna, when he comes to Vaikuntha, he is in his four-handed form, right? Now, in his four-handed form, he is all sober. He is very serious. So it's a different mood. See, when you're at home, you are more casual, correct? You're more casual. You're more free. You're more free to talk to, right? You're happier at home, right? But then when you're in the office or when you're in school, there's a certain amount of sobriety attached to it, right? So you are more serious in school or in the office, right? So it's like that for Vishnu. It's at Vaikuntham, right? So in Vaikuntham, he is in the four-handed form, and it is in Vaikuntham that he deals with all the demigods who come and report to the Lord as to what is happening and why and what is the desires of the devotees, and all that happens in Vaikuntham, right? But in Goloka Vrindavan, the main distinction is the Lord is intimate, right? All the pastimes, as I mentioned, happens in Goloka Vrindavan, right? So the object of the soul is to go back to Goloka Vrindavan, right? That is the most important thing that we should understand. So that is broadly the distinction, Prabhu, between Goloka Vrindavan and Vaikuntham, right? The difference is in the mood. The person is the same, right? But then the same person can be in different moods in different places, right? So the difference is only in the mood, not in the person. Okay.
Okay, Prabhuji. So,
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, in Vaikuntha, Krishna lives or the Vishnu with Lakshmi Ma lips.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, Prabhuji. Okay. That was
It's,
Pranam.
it's a very popular painting, right? Where you see Sri Devi sitting at the feet of Vishnu, and Vishnu is in
Yes,
Ananta
Prabhuji.
Sayanam
Yes.
in the serpent bed.
Yes,
Adishesha,
Prabhuji.
right? So that is
Mhm.
that is the Vaikuntha form of Lord Vishnu. Of Lord Vishnu, who's also Krishna. So it's the difference in name. They are both the same tattva. The principle is the same. They're the same persons, but in a different mode. Okay. So these are all high philosophy. Okay, not don't get confused at this stage with all this. So okay, we're just focusing on Bhagavad Gita. Let's just stick to Bhagavad Gita. Okay, now this you'll all learn it in level 2. So please continue after the conclusion of the 18 days. Level 2 will start probably in maybe September, right? October we'll start another batch of level 2, right? So this is all covered there. Okay, so
Okay, Prabhuji.
understand the lessons of the Gita, but I'm glad that you know about Goloka Vrindavan. Not many people know about Goloka Vrindavan. Okay, and we'll also be dealing with this in something called the Goloka chart further down. I think chapter 9 or chapter 8. We deal specifically with Goloka Vrindavan. We deal with Vaikuntham. We deal with Garbhodaksha Vishnu. We deal. Oh, I'm sure you would also be knowing that there are 3 kinds of Vishnus: Garbhodaksha Vishnu, Shirodaksha Vishnu, and Mahavishnu.
Mahavishnu. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes,
there are
Prabhuji.
quite a lot of high philosophy we'll be dealing with. Okay, so all this we will examine when we come to that chapter. I'll explain
Okay,
in
Prabhuji.
detail when we deal with Goloka chart, right? Hare
Okay,
Krishna,
okay.
Prabhu.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Dandavat Pranam. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Are we
Yes,
going to do the revision of previous chapters?
Oh, yes, wonderful. Thank you so much for reminding me. Mataji, what do I do without your help? I don't know. Thank you so much, Mataji. I completely forgot. Yes, so now that we have completed today is the 4th chapter, right? Let's quickly revise chapter wise. So far, let's see. Day 1 was the first chapter, right? So let's see. Mataji, can you just unmute them all so that they might be able to answer? And I don't want answers just from one person, okay? So please try and contribute, all of you all. If you know the answer, just say it in your mic, so I'll be able to understand that you've understood. Okay, so let's see. The first question is who spoke the first verse in Bhagavad Gita?
Drashtraj.
Sorry,
Drashtraj.
who's this Raj? You mean Dhritarashtra?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Right. Okay, so that's right. Dhritarashtra was the one who spoke about, who spoke the first verse. Now, what did he ask, Sanjaya?
What's happening in the field, in
What's
the
happening in the
Dham field
battlefield?
and
Excellent.
battlefield?
Oh,
Yes, Prabhuji.
okay. And what are the five elements that are dealt with in the Bhagavad Gita? I mentioned about 5 elements, 4 of which are eternal and 1 is not eternal. What are the 5 elements? Can anyone tell me?
Karma.
Karma is the non-eternal one. Correct. Very good. So we have 4 more
Yes.
to go.
Not.
Okay. So what is Bhagavad Gita dealing with? Who is Krishna? He is God, Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? So he is Ishvara. So Bhagavad Gita deals with Ishvara, right? Then Bhagavad Gita also deals with the material modes of nature, which is Prakriti, correct? And then Bhagavad Gita also deals with Jiva and Kala, correct? So these are the 5 elements: Ishvara, Prakriti, Jiva, Kala, and Karma. So the first 4 are eternal, right? That is Ishvara, Prakriti, Jiva, Kala. The last one, Karma, is not eternal, right? Okay, so that is what? That's from chapter 1. Okay, quickly, what are the 5 grounds in which Arjuna says, I'm not going to fight? Anyone? What? No one's taken notes? That's sad. What are the 5 grounds that Arjuna says? Which
That
prevent
he
me from
won't kill
fighting?
his family members for the earth.
Okay, that's one. Then go on.
And lost to the ancient paramparas.
Okay, dynasty. Okay, then
It's a sin.
Yes, it's a sin. What is the
And
first ground
out
that he
of
says?
compassion.
Compassion is the first ground. And one more to go.
Indecision.
Indecision. Excellent, excellent. Right. So that's taken care of. So that's the important points of chapter 1. Okay. And let's go to chapter 2 now. So how does Krishna answer all the ground? So for example, how does Krishna answer the ground of compassion? When Arjuna says, I'm very compassionate to my opponents. So how does Krishna answer them?
We are not the body.
Yes, we are not the body, but what are we?
We are
We are
souls.
the soul.
We are the soul. So that is the answer that Krishna gives for the first ground of compassion. And what is the second ground? No enjoyment. Correct. So when Arjuna says that there is no enjoyment, how does Krishna answer it?
You get it either in the heaven or through a kingdom.
Kingdom. Wonderful. Excellent. That's right. And the fourth and the third ground is, what is the third ground? What is let's see. Fear of sinful
Indecision.
reactions. Yeah, sinful reactions. So what is the,
Okay.
how does Krishna answer for that? For sinful reaction?
Devotional activity has no sinful
Has
reaction.
no sin. Brilliant. Fantastic. Correct. That's the answer I was looking for. Right. And what is the fourth ground? Fourth ground is the destruction of family traditions. How does Krishna answer that?
Varna Shankara.
How do you prevent Varna Shankara? The leadership sloka we saw, no, be a role model. That is Krishna's teaching, and that's Krishna's answer to prevent Varna Shankara. Okay, and for indecision, what was his answer for indecision?
Serve the Lord with the firm determination.
Firm determination. Excellent. Very nicely done. Okay, can you all tell me, anyone, what are the characteristics of a soul? We saw about the soul, where Krishna says you're the soul, not the body. So what are the characteristics of a soul?
It is the part and parcel of the Lord Krishna.
Okay, wonderful. But yeah, that is a very important characteristic. But that comes much later, actually. But so in chapter 2, how does Krishna explain the soul? What are the characteristics of the soul? What does Krishna say the soul is like? Krishna says that there is no birth for the soul,
No,
correct? Yeah, there's no death also for the soul, right? And Krishna says that it never comes into existence, that it is unborn, that it is eternal, that it is primeval. All these are characteristics of the soul. And Krishna also says that you cannot cut it by any weapon, you cannot drench it with water, you cannot burn it with fire. All these, Krishna says, are the characteristics of the soul, right? Okay, so that is about the first part of the chapter. Now, what do you call a person who has these 5 elements, who has understood these 5 elements? Well, what is the phrase I used during the class?
Sthitadhar Muni.
Yes, Sitadir Muni, a person with steady mind. Sitadir is steady mind, right? So that is broadly, if you've understood that in the second class, that is good enough. Okay. And importantly, the last 2 slides were important, isn't it? That the last 2 slides where we saw about how one thing leads to another. What does one thing lead to another, right? Can you just tell me the cycle? I hope my question is clear. Probably my question is not clear.
Contemplation on sense objects.
Sorry?
Contemplation on sense objects.
Yes. Yes, that's what I was referring to. Correct. So you got it. So please tell me.
Then attachment.
Yeah. So contemplation leads to what?
Attachment.
Yes, very good. And attachment then leads to what?
Lust.
Lust.
Okay. So what does lust lead to?
Anger.
Anger.
Excellent. And what does anger lead to?
Frustration.
Okay. Okay. Correct. Fair enough.
Disillusion.
The delusion is the answer I was looking for, but fair enough. It's close enough. Okay. And then what happens once you're deluded?
Bewilderment of memory.
Memory, right? So and then what happens if you're bewildered of memory?
We lose
Hold on.
intelligence.
You lose intelligence. Yes. And then what happens if you lose intelligence? You fall
fall
back
down
into the
to
material pool.
Material.
Right. So what is the important takeaway there? you have to control your senses when you start thinking about it, right? So the moment you start thinking about it, when you start contemplating it, that is when it is easiest to control. Okay, so that is an important lesson again from chapter 2. Okay, so that was a quick revision of chapter 2. Now let's do chapter 3. Chapter 3, okay, let me give you an open-ended question. Okay, so what did you learn in chapter 3? What is the main point that appealed to you in chapter 3? Open-ended, it can be anything. There are several lessons in chapter 3. What appealed to you in chapter 3? We have 13 persons left and we hardly have 1 or 2 answering. Come on, please participate. Okay, so what appealed to you all in chapter 3? What do you remember from chapter 3? Not nothing. Nobody remembers anything. Come on. I thought we went into great
that we have
detail.
to offer food for Krishna, or else it will be it is just a sin to eat that food.
Yes, that's right. So before you eat, you have to offer the food to Krishna, right? So you say Krishna Arpanam before you eat. At this stage, it is sufficient. There are several things that you can do in an advanced level, but at this stage, just think of Krishna before you eat food, right? That is probably the second takeaway from that chapter. What is the first?
We should
first,
work on our senses.
you should work on our senses. That lesson throughout the Bhagavad Gita you'll get it in chapter 2, you'll get it also in chapter 18, you'll get it throughout the Bhagavad Gita that you have to control your senses. So that answer is applicable for all the chapters. Okay, what is specifically mentioned in chapter 3?
Sir, I think sacrifices.
Sorry?
Sacrifices. Yagyas.
Yeah, sacrifices of what? Of any work you do, right? Of anything that you do, just sacrifice it to Krishna. Okay, that is why it is important. Why? Otherwise, what happens? Krishna says in verse 9 of chapter 3 that work has to be done as a sacrifice to Krishna. Otherwise, what happens? That work will cause bondage, right? Now, if you don't sacrifice it to Krishna, you earn good karma, bad karma, right? Now, if you have bad karma, you can't get out of this cycle of life and death, and that defeats the purpose of the soul, correct? So therefore, it is that before you do any work, just think of Krishna for a second and just say, Krishna, I'm doing this for you. Please accept this sacrifice. That's it. Very simple thing. Okay. So, but it is something that that you have to implement. And it is a very vital thing. This has practical application, isn't it? Because all we do in Kali Yuga is work, and more work, right? So when you're doing that work, you have to dedicate it to Krishna. That's when it becomes what? What does it become? When you do it for Krishna, what is the word I'm looking for? Come on, it becomes?
Nishkama karma.
Yes, very good, very good. It becomes Nishkama Karma Yoga. And what is the opposite of Nishkama Karma Yoga?
Sakama karma.
Wonderful, wonderful, excellent, excellent. Okay, so if that you've understood that, that's good enough. I'm very happy about that. Right. So the conclusion of the chapter was about the 2 things that impel a person to do sinful activities in spite of knowing them to be sinful. What are those 2 things? It was in verse 37, I think. What are those 2 things which cause a person? Arjuna's question was specifically this: why do I do sinful things when I know that they are sinful? It is as if I'm forced to do sinful things in spite of knowing that they are sinful, right?
Lust
So what
and
is what? Come again?
Lust and anger.
Yes. And their Sanskrit equivalents? Kama and Krodha, right? Yes. So that is the right answer. Very good, Mataji. Thank you so much. So broadly, you have understood, I hope, these 3 chapters. To today's chapter, we will revise tomorrow before class starts. So probably I'll join 10 minutes earlier, and today's class we'll revise tomorrow. I hope this is understandable. I hope I'm able to communicate the message, because see, previously if it is an elders class, I can go full blown philosophy, right? But then when it comes to adolescence, I'm neither here nor that. For kids, teaching, I mean, spreading the word of Gita to kids is an entirely different way. Okay. talking about the Gita to elders is a completely different way, because there's no restriction. I can talk about all philosophies. But when it comes to adolescents, which is probably most of you all, there's certain changes, there's certain molding of the way in which I have to communicate the message that has to be done. So I hope I'm doing a proper job of it. No?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, probably I'll circulate a feedback form after tomorrow or day after. Let me just frame it right, and you can tell me what needs to be changed, because we still have 2/3 of Bhagavad Gita to go, right? So today is the 4th class. By the time we come to the 6th chapter, I'll be circulating this feedback form. Please give me feedback, and we'll make changes in the class accordingly. Okay, supposing you feel that there's too much philosophy, then I'll just cut down on philosophy a lot, or I'll try and make it simplify. But I don't want to oversimplify it, because what happens when you oversimplify, the essence of the message is lost, right? So this is a very delicate balance that has to be taken into consideration. So just let me know if there's anything that you like to change in the class when I give you the feedback form, right? So with that, we conclude today, 8 o'clock almost. So thank you for joining. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Neha Mataji, thank you for your devotional service. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for
Thank you
having
so
me.
much,
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna.